I'm going to start letting people into the Zoom now, so be prepared. Hi, everybody. So we are going to get started in just a few minutes. So you guys can just wait until we get more people in the Zoom. All right, I think we're going to get started. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our virtual talk. Just a few things before we get started. If you could please keep yourselves muted throughout the entire presentation. If you have any questions, you can type your questions into the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and our speaker will be happy to answer any and all questions, either in the Zoom or in the chat or whatever. If you're joining us over Facebook Live, we welcome you as well. Our Facebook audience can also ask questions by putting your questions in the chat, and we will answer those at the end of the program. If you could please note that this talk is being recorded and streamed live, and it will be posted to our social media channels once the talk is over. So if you would like to watch this talk or rewatch previous virtual talks, you can check out our Facebook page. And I am excited to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Florence Gillman, who is a docent with the Timken and is going to give an amazing lecture today. So I will hand it over to Florence.
Oh, thank you, Taylor. Good morning, everybody. I see some people I know and some people I don't. So thanks for taking the time to Zoom in here today. I will talk for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I'll see what's a good stopping point, and then I will take questions for maybe 2 or so minutes, very short, and then we'll have the longer question answer period at the end. So as you see, this is a lecture about 3 Bartholomews, all connected with Rembrandt. 2 are for sure by Rembrandt, one in 1657 and 1661. The one on the left that you see is dated much earlier in his career, 1631, maybe 1633, and it has vacillated, having been listed sometimes by Rembrandt and currently listed by his studio. When you look at all 3, you can see the similarities in the coloring, in the emphasis on the face. And while it's hard to see it in the left one, you can't see the knife. But in the other 2, you can clearly see the knife, which is the attribute that we're looking for in these paintings. So here we go. We'll look at the, well, let me go back and just say, well, first we're going to look at the ones that are by Rembrandt for sure, the 1657 and the 1661. And then we'll go to the one on the left, the much earlier one. So this is the 1657 version, and this is the one at the Timken. This is the one that those of us who are there often get to look at very, very frequently. It's one of the greatest treasures of the Timken. Some people say that Rembrandt lovers literally make a pilgrimage to the Timken to see this painting. So we are very lucky to have it. It is, as you can see by the size of it, quite a large painting. And when we first look at it, I think what's important is to see that the light in this painting is reflected off of the face of Bartholomew, sorry, and off his cuff, indicating he's got a white shirt on underneath his jacket. And the light is clearly coming off the knife. The reason he's holding a knife is that he was skinned alive. So this is the great tragedy that he endured as a martyr. So I want to tell you a few things about him, the traditions about him, why he became so famous and why artists like to paint him. So he was one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. In the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we get his name, Bartholomew, but in the Gospel of John, he is called Nathaniel. So he goes by two names. He's conflated then, and his dominant name is Bartholomew. He was kind of famous because in the time of Jesus, who was from Nazareth, Bartholomew was quoted as saying, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" In other words, could this two-bit town produce a great person? And of course, he then himself becomes a follower of Jesus. So I guess he decided, yes, something good can come out of that town. He was always associated with another apostle whose name is Philip in very early church traditions. So it was like they were kind of companions, or they generally worked together. And the stories say that he connect him with India, Armenia, and Arabia. So after the death of Jesus, when his followers were starting to go around preaching about him, there's no indication that they had a big meeting and divided up the world. It's nothing like that. There's no indication they had a big board meeting and said, okay, it's time to start the church. No, nothing like that. They wandered around talking about what had happened to them and talking about who Jesus was and talking about their belief that God raised him from the dead. So they didn't really plan who should go where, but the ancient traditions are filled with a lot of information about where they did go. So Bartholomew was thought to have gone east to India, Armenia, and Arabia. He was martyred. Armenia apparently ended up with his body. At least it claimed it did. And all these kinds of traditions are very difficult to check out, prove. They're traditions. So the Christians of Armenia claimed that they had the bones of Bartholomew. So bones of a martyr in early Christianity were very important to have, because people felt like if you could be near the martyr, even the martyr's bones, you could somehow be strengthened in your own witness and so on, or you could be healed. People don't think that way quite so much today, I don't think, but the the bones of the martyrs really mattered. So anyway, Bartholomew's were in Armenia. I will show you where they ended up in a minute. So medieval traditions slightly differ. Some of them say he was flayed alive. So he was skinned alive, which would be a terribly brutal, not to say a hard thing for the persecutors to do to him. But the traditions say he was flayed alive. But there are some traditions that also say he was crucified or beheaded. These things are all important to know because then when you're looking at the three Bartholomews of Rembrandt, this is what he's reflecting on. This is what he wants to show in the face of Bartholomew, that Bartholomew either knows he's going to be martyred or suspects it, or we could ask a lot of questions. Does he dread it? Does he accept his fate? So there's a lot to look for in the face of Bartholomew. You might wonder where all these medieval traditions come from. Well, there's a book of which there are many copies. It's called The Golden Legend. And this is a copy from the Laurentian Library in Florence, Italy. The Laurentian Library was basically one of the collections of the famous Medicis. The books there are unbelievable. If you ever go to Florence, make sure you go to this library. And I'm sure some of you already have been there. It's simply extraordinary to see what they have. So this is a 1290 copy. It's written quite a bit earlier. It's the kind of book that was collected. So every version of it isn't exactly the same. Sometimes they have more stories in one than in another. As you can see, this copy is what we call an incunabula. That means as a manuscript, it is handwritten. It predates the printing press, which was invented in 1454 in Mainz, Germany, as you know, by Johann Gutenberg. So this is an incunabula, and you can see how it's sewn together on the spine. You can see it's actually weak right now. So people who could read, and there weren't many, would read, go to wherever they could get access to a book like this, or preachers would read this, or other kind of speakers would read the stories, and then they would tell them to everybody else. So that was pretty exciting literature. And this is where we find these traditions. So whenever you hear in any lecture, oh yeah, there's medieval traditions, chances are, if it's about a saint, it's in this book. Okay, I want to tell you some more about him. So there's an apocryphal gospel attributed to him. Now, what's that? In early Christianity, and the same thing happened in Judaism, especially Second Temple Judaism, which means from about the 500s BCE forward. There were lots of documents written that did not make either the Hebrew Bible canon or the New Testament canon, because the people who were deciding what the canon really should be would say, well, that is not really representative of this tradition. It's a deviant document. Okay, but those documents have been preserved here and there, and they are very interesting to scholars. Well, anyway, one of those Christian documents coming from the 300s or 400s AD is by Bartholomew. So it's like his version of the gospel, but it's not in the New Testament. It's too late and too deviant, you could say. It did not correlate with what the real Christians thought. So I already said there's a lot about him in the Golden Legend. Now let me just tell you a little bit more of what's known. So I told you he probably died in Armenia. of being flayed alive. So it was said his relics were brought to Rome from Armenia via Benevento in around 983. We can't test that out at all. There's no way we can. It's just information in the Golden Legend, and that's the tradition. So in any case, his relics are in the Church of San Bartolomeo on the Tiber Island in Rome. So I'm going to show you a picture of that in a minute. First, I want to tell you a little bit about it. I'm suspecting that quite a few of you have been in Rome and that you've been on the Tiber Island. Almost everybody who goes to Rome, eventually wanders across the bridges on the Tiber River. And there's an island there called Isola Tiberina, which is the Tiber Island, which has an incredible history. And on that island, there are quite a few churches. It's fun to go there today just to check out the old churches, but also that's the best place to go to dinner. It's sort of like the gas lamp of Rome. So Tiber Island is very busy. So you have this combination of churches and ancient history and then good Italian food. Anyway, the relics are, now get this, the relics are in an ancient Roman bathtub made of porphyry, which is a green stone, very, very valuable. And what they did is they turned this bathtub into the base of the altar of the church. It's gorgeous. I'll show you in a minute. Now, one of his arms, okay, in medieval Christianity, if they had relics, of course, not everybody had enough relics to have some in their church. So they started splitting up the body. So they sent, in this case, for example, they sent one of Bartholomew's arms in a reliquary. So if you've ever seen one of those, it looks like this. The arm is straight up. See how my arm is? And then it will be in a very fancy case. So that's like an arm reliquary. And that would be important to people because they would want to go be near that and, ask the saint to pray that they would have courage to undergo martyrdom and so on, or that the saint would pray to God to heal them. We always have to remember in the modern world where we don't think a lot about relics and stuff like that. Why? Because we have science, we have incredibly good medicine. We aren't as desperate as people were for most of history before us. When you think about it, what recourse did most people in most of history have to terrible disease? In many cases, they had magical ideas, incantations, taking strange, eating strange things like the blood of something, or, we could go on and on about what they did. We forget in the modern world the human desperation that most people lived with in the face of disease. So people thought that relics were a way to be near a saint and ask the saint to ask God to help you. Maybe the saint could get more help from God than you could directly. So we have to really think about how they thought. And we have to think of human desperation throughout so much of, think of your own family, think of your own babies, your own grandchildren, and if they get sick, how quickly we get them to the doctor. But in the ancient world, what did you do? In the medieval world, what did you do? You were desperate. So people try to get near a relic, maybe, among other things. Anyway, it was a tradition that Bartholomew's arm went to the Canterbury Cathedral in the 11th century, the 1000s, but nobody knows where it is now. It got lost in the Reformation. So he is the patron saint of leather workers and butchers. And in the famous Smithfield Market in London, there's a hospital, and that's St. Bartholomew's. And as I already said, many artists have depicted him. Okay, this is San Bartolomeo on the Tiber Island, Isola Tiberina. And you see the writing across the three entryways. It says, in this basilica rests the body of Saint Bartholomew, an apostle. When you go inside, it's like this. And I'm going to use my cursor. I hope you can see it. So up here, you walk down the aisle, this is the main altar here. And look underneath. See this black? It looks black from here, but it's actually green. That's the porphyry bathtub I was telling you about, so that they put the relics in there, and it becomes the base for the altar. Okay, there's a lot more we could say about this place, but anyway, I think we set the stage for who he is. Now let's talk about his attributes in paintings, so that when you see a painting that might be Bartholomew, you can tell if it is by the knife. The knife is the most consistent attribute, and it's a specific kind of knife. If you notice, it's considered to be a flaying knife. So the kind of knife you would use to peel off skin. I don't often peel off skin of something, do you? But I do if I'm fixing salmon, a fillet of salmon. I tend to get a certain knife to get under the skin and then pull it off. So that's flaying a piece of fish. Anyway, it takes a certain knife. Well, another attribute is his curly hair. So not in every painting, but in some, curly hair, and in some, a book, but not, the most consistent attribute is the knife. Okay, now this painting is quite early by Ribera. It's in a Catalonian National Museum. And this actually shows the flaying of Bartholomew. And of course, as you see, this is the beginning of the flaying. He's still alive. If you look at his face, and if you look from any angle, he's looking at you. He's looking at the viewer. When that happens, it's as if the subject of the painting is communicating with you, is asking you something. So you have to think about what might he ask us? Is he asking us, do you have the courage of your convictions? What do you think of my misfortune here? What do you think of my martyrdom? What do you think of my punishment? We have to just try to read into it. We don't know what Rembrandt himself was, or what Ribera was thinking here himself, but we do know that when the figure is looking right at you, the figure wants to the artist through the figure wants to communicate. So as I pointed out here, this is a very realistic portrayal of what happened. Okay, my slide's stuck here. There. This is an earlier one, and this one portrays him as already flayed. So you see him in his left hand, he's holding the skin of his leg. Do you see that? With the foot, the toes. And then draped around him is more of his skin. So this is quite an interesting portrayal. This one's in Hungary, in Budapest. Okay, I think the most famous one of Bartholomew is his portrayal in The Last Judgment by Michelangelo on one of the walls of the Sistine Chapel. I added this red mark here in the center of the picture. Do you see it? I added that red mark so you could find him, so you can see him. So here he is. I'll draw a circle around him. He's right here. And he's holding his skin. And notice that in Michelangelo's portrayal, he is very close. He's like the inner circle around Jesus because he was traditionally one of the apostles. Now I'll move to a detail of this. So here's an excerpt from Michelangelo's Last Judgment. And here you can see very well the skin, the flayed skin, and his face. Okay, there's two paintings of St. Bartholomew, the 1657 and 1661 here in Southern California. How that ever happened is kind of just coincidental that there's one at the Timken and one at the Getty, but that's delightful for people who really want to see them see them for themselves and want to make some kind of comparison. The third one, the earlier one that is now attributed to his studio, is in Massachusetts at the Worcester Art Museum. And that one has an intriguing story that I'll be telling you as we go along here. It was once stolen and then found. So we don't really know why Rembrandt painted Bartholomew. Was it a commission? Was it part of a series of apostles? Was it part of maybe paired, for example, with some of his portraits of St. Paul? You know, who Paul went west, Bartholomew went east. Was it something like that? We just don't know. So Rembrandt himself, at this is his self-portrait, 1659. Okay, and throughout his life, he was interested in biblical painting and in historical painting. So if you think of the Rembrandts, you know offhand, these are subjects he very much leans into. He lived in the period of what we call the Counter-Reformation, so the period after the Reformation. In Amsterdam, it had become heavily Calvinist, but he did not join the church himself. So even though he was very influenced by the Reformation, and that affected his living to a great deal, because the churches of the Reformation, in contrast to the previous centuries where Catholicism was the great patron of the arts, but the churches of the Reformation were against too much art within the church. Didn't want a lot of paintings, didn't want a lot of statues and so on. So that hurt Rembrandt's living, but nevertheless, he continued to paint biblical figures, probably because of some private commissions, but maybe because there's something about these figures that grasped, I can't say it today, grasped him himself. Yes, so also, it's always pointed out that in his later works, he's more introspective than in his earlier ones. Later, he had much hardship in his later life, and that is usually related to how serious his later figures are, how pensive, how they seem to be lost in thought, as if trying to figure out what has happened to them, what's going to happen, and it's not good. So let's look at the two paintings and then we'll go to the last one. So I said from the 1640s, he had a difficult life. So his wife, Saskia, had died in 1642. Here he uses her and himself. Thanks. We're very glad he did this. He uses Saskia and himself to portray the prodigal son in a brothel. So this is a wonderful self-portrait of them. But she died in 1642. And as I said, his income declined. He had a lot of difficulty making payments on his house. And they had a son. And so he had a wet nurse for the son, Geertje Dirks. And so then she eventually became his common law wife. But this lowered his social standing since they weren't really married in the church, the Reformed Church. So that drew criticism of Rembrandt. But also then he hired another woman, Hendrika Stoffels, and she might have been hired to help Geertje. But when she became pregnant and eventually had their daughter Cornelia, so Rembrandt was very much maligned because of this. She was condemned by the Reformed Church, but since he didn't belong to the church, he wasn't, but nevertheless, his reputation suffered. So eventually he declared insolvency and his paintings were sold. Okay, so looking at the Timken's Bartholomew, I think I already drew your attention to the light in his face, the light on the knife, the light on the cuff. Seems like some light is coming from the right background also. But keep all this in mind as we look at a couple of quotes, actually a few quotes. I'll just go through them quickly from the Timken's curator, Dr. Derek Cartwright. He has some very interesting statements that summarize a lot about this painting. So he says, at his best as he was when painting St. Bartholomew, the artist Rembrandt was masterful at representing complex states of mind. Leaning forward in a slightly inquisitive manner, the bearded figure in this dark composition seems to ask, what makes you think you've got it bad? So, well, that's Derek's reaction. That's valid because whatever you think he's saying to you is valid, right? We don't know what Rembrandt thought he was saying, but you cannot stand in front of this painting without engaging with the figure, without looking into his face and saying, are you trying to communicate with me? What are you saying? So, as if in response to his own question, he holds in his right hand a broad steel blade that references his own martyrdom. Bartholomew was skinned alive. Pointedly, no pun intended, the knife itself reflects an exterior light source glinting near the image's center. So in this version of Bartholomew, the knife is very central. Then a very curious fact that Dr. Cartwright points out is someone apparently was uncomfortable in some way or wanted for some reason to change this painting and turned that knife into a book. And it's lucky that art conservators were able to remove that, to chip away that added layer of paint. It's very lucky they were able to do that, to return it to the original. Why would somebody do that? Why would somebody change that knife into a book? Well, we don't know for sure. We don't know who did it for sure. But Derek thinks, as he points out, it's a squeamish owner. So maybe, and the name of the painting was changed various times then. So, okay, so beyond showing off the artist's bravura, brushwork, and his uncanny ability to conjure realist effects, St. Bartholomew's expressive impact depends on our appreciation of the saint's refusal to give into or even register personal despair. He remains stoic and utterly convinced of his role in spreading the gospel throughout the world. I think, in other words, Derek Cartwright is reflecting what a lot of people say about this painting, which is Bartholomew knows what's going to happen to him. He's not, he's rather placid. He's not in angst in this picture. He has accepted who he is, what his role has been as an apostle. He seems to know what's going to happen. So we see a very mature Bartholomew here. Okay, before I talk about the Getty's Bartholomew, I'd like to have Taylor release all of your mute buttons and see if anybody wants to jump in here with a short question. If you could keep it to maybe a minute at the most or so, we could discuss some of what we've already said here. Okay, Jane, jump in, please.
The question of an attribute showing that the image is of a martyr makes me ask, what about the palm leaf that we see in the paintings of Saint Catherine? I thought that was a general attribute of martyrdom, but there's certainly not any of that in the Saint Bartholomew paintings.
Yes. Well, I don't know that it's, that every martyr painting has that attribute. It may be quite common in martyr paintings, but, Rembrandt has struck out on his own course. Anyway, yes.
Okay, thanks.
A good observation, though, to bring in. Yeah.
I could comment on that. This is Dee Dee.
Oh, hi, Dee Dee.
Hi.
Okay.
In the Veronese that we have with Catherine kneeling on the wheel on the floor, and others, yes, there are palm fronds, but they're dead. This is, there's no pretense that they'd still be alive. I think Rembrandt was trying to say he wasn't dead yet, referring to this version of Bartholomew. He's still alive. He hasn't got there yet. That's why he is pensive about it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes, I think that fits also with Derek's observation that he's calm. He knows his future. He has accepted who he is. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he will go forward in life with courage. Okay, any other comments?
I had a question on your the Ribera painting that you showed with him getting flayed. There is a Roman face as a statue off to the left corner. And I'm just wondering, what does that have to do? Is that supposed to be that he doesn't worship the Roman gods, or what's going on there? Do you know?
Could be. I don't really know. I didn't pursue that myself. That's a good question.
All righty.
Yes. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if you go back to mute, let's look now at the Getty's St. Bartholomew. So you see this is a very large painting also, but not quite as big. This is a more frontal view. And if you ask me, the knife is less prominent. It's in the lower left, but it's prominent. Okay, because when we get to the third painting, you can hardly see the knife. Okay, but it's in the lower left. So this frontal view of St. Bartholomew, when I first started to look at this and study it, I thought, oh, he looks so contemporary. He doesn't look quite as 17th century as as the previous one. But then when you really look at it closely, no, he is, his clothing is relatively similar to the Timken's Bartholomew. But even his haircut at first put me off. It was like, oh, he looks so contemporary. So the wrinkles in his hand are commented upon by some art historians. And this shows his age, I think, because of the grayishness, which actually is the blood vessels of his hand showing so clearly. But also the skin is so not fleshed out. It suggests that it would be easy to flay him. You could easily get hold of the skin to cut it away from him, which is the tragedy he faces. I think if you look at him from any direction, I keep playing with it, he is looking at the viewer. So he too, Rembrandt through him also wants to dialogue with the viewer. It's like, well, here I am very close to what this knife can do. And let's see some of the, well, I thought this close-up really shows the state of his hand especially, and brings us closer to his face. So he's very old in this picture, very experienced. There's no illusion about what's ahead of him. Okay, so I'm wondering what you think. I mean, it does seem like he is in a less agitated mode, but is it? Some have said he's in a less agitated mode than the San Diego painting. I'm not sure, but that could be. Is he more pensive than the San Diego painting? He's pensive, it's for sure. Is he not looking at the viewer? I think he is. Some art historians think he isn't. Yeah, the technique that is pointed out that he uses here is the application of thick paint, the technique of impasto that you can see on his forehead, his nose, his ears, his hands. This technique adds what do I want to say, texture to the painting that is considered to make it more expressive. So it contrasts with the smoother style of Rembrandt's earlier paintings, and that would be true in the third one when we get to it. So, all right, so we've looked at these two paintings, 1657 and 1661. Now let's go to the third. So this is some 30 or more years earlier. As I said, it has been off and on said to be by Rembrandt himself, and then by his studio, by his students, perhaps multiple hands. I have not found the more recent statements from the Worcester Museum. The Worcester Museum is fantastic. They put a lot of data about their paintings online. They have not published online, as far as I can see, how recently the decision was made to attribute this to the studio rather than Rembrandt. So in some of their older literature, they say it's by Rembrandt. Now their current statement is it's his studio. So in any case, it's signed by Rembrandt on the blade of the knife, but does that mean he actually, does that mean he did it, or is it the studio? Anyway, right now they say it's the studio. Notice the amount of red on his face in this painting. And the light, like in the other two, is coming from the face. In other words, the light of the person is the, for lack of a better way to put it, the soul of the person showing through. So here's the comparison that I used for the title page. Now, let's look at a few details about it. So the reddish features are interpreted as Rembrandt's desire to bring attention to his emotional expression. But notice how tight his skin is, like compared to the Getty's Bartholomew. What's interesting here is his mouth is slightly opened too. So is he trying to say something to the viewer? Does he want us to hear him in some way? Is he saying, do you know about me? Do you know what's going to happen to me? And notice also that the knife in this painting is in the shadow. It's very hard to see it. So while it is the attribute, yeah, it's not a source of light at all. Some art historians have said that this painting dates to the period when Rembrandt really wanted to show deep emotion. In other words, they would interpret this as more emotional than the later two, where Bartholomew knows his future and has accepted it. They would see this as Bartholomew struggling with his future, perhaps seeing the handwriting on the wall. So, well, as I just said, the saint is seen as calmer in the other two. Basically more psychologically honest about what the future is. Here he's seen as perhaps grappling with his own future. Okay, so this painting got stolen, and that's kind of an interesting story. If you want to read it in more detail, you could go to the website of the Worcester Art Museum. I'll try to just kind of summarize it here. So the theft of this the theft of this Rembrandt was in 1972. Don't confuse it with the more recent theft of the Rembrandt Quieting of the Storm on the Sea from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in 1990, because a lot of people know about that. That's a phenomenal story. There's a Netflix series already about it, and it's never been found. Yeah, this was an earlier theft of a Rembrandt, and this was the very first art heist done with in the daylight with a gun. It was a holdup. In other words, it was not a nighttime move like the 1990 heist was. So this one was done in pure daylight at the end of a gun. Yeah, so in this one, the thieves took the Rembrandt of St. Bartholomew, and they took 2 Gauguins and 1 Picasso. It has never been solved in the sense of, it has been solved, and the paintings have been returned, unlike the more recent one, the 1990, that hasn't been solved. So what happened in 1972? I put it all on one page. I know it's a lot on one page, but we'll go through it just kind of slowly. So there was this guy, a petty crook named Al Monday, and he liked art. He really liked Renoir, and he was the mastermind behind the theft. And the motive was to sell the paintings on the black market, where he would not get anything near their value, but where he would end up with quite a bit of money, nevertheless. So money was his motive. So he cased the museum and he found that daytime security was inadequate. So think about that if you're a docent at the Timken, because when we're there, the security is there. And did you ever notice they don't just stand around, they move. They move and they're looking all the time. And yeah, well, the daytime security at the Worcester Museum was not particularly good, and he noticed that. So he chose the paintings in the collection that he thought were the most valuable. So yeah, the Saint Bartholomew, Gauguin's Brooding Woman, and Mademoiselle Manthe, and two Gauguins, and then Picasso's Mother and Child by a fountain, Mother and Child by a fountain. So he did not do the robbery himself. He got two petty thieves who helped him with other heists, and he told them which paintings he wanted, and he told them how to do it, and he gave them a gun with one bullet in it, and he didn't want them to use it because, of course, if they used the gun, and if they got caught, the crime would be worse than if they were unarmed. So they said he estimated that even on the black market, he would make a lot. So he thought he would get 10% of the value. And he thought the Rembrandt was worth $2 million. So they were supposed to carry this off without using the gun, but a security guard did stop them on the way out. And so as soon as that happened, they shot him. He lived to tell the story. And so the crime then was armed robbery. So what Al Mundy did was, first he hid the paintings in a false ceiling up above the ceiling panels. But then he got nervous and he hid them in a trunk, and he put the trunk in a pickup truck and took it out into Rhode Island to a pig farm, where he put the trunk in a hayloft. So as a petty crook, he had participated in various other jobs, and he hired these two. They were part of the whole ring, and other people knew, and they knew what he had done. And so two other crooks who were violent criminals who were already to be sentenced by a judge for something they had done. Okay, they told the judge where the paintings were in order to get a better deal for themselves from the judge. And that's how they were able to be recovered just within 4 weeks. There's a whole book about this. It's called Stealing Rembrandts. And these authors got direct information from Monday. So that's how we know really quite a few details. And as you can see, this paperback came out in 2021. Well, that's the story. Now, Shirley, I want to hear what you're thinking. So Taylor, can you unmute everybody? And yeah, tell me. Questions, comments?
I'll let Jane go.
Oh, as usual, I have questions and comments. I'm interested in the way in the three portraits they're dressed. Our Timken painting has the least elaborate or the simplest robe, which in person is very hard to see. On your slide, there's much better light on it, so we can actually see what it is. But if you look at the 1661, he's got a lot of clothing on, which makes you think about, if his skin is going to be flayed, they got to get off all the clothing. And then the one on the left, the 1631, he's wearing a fur collar. or the whole robe, it's hard to tell.
Yeah,
is
it's hard
made
to
of
tell.
Fur, or made of fur, but do you think there's any significance to the way that Rembrandt has painted the clothing on these three figures?
Well, like I said, when I first went from the 1657 to the 1661, I was like, oh, the 1661 looks like he's from a different era. He looks sort of
He
modern.
does. That hairstyle, you're right. He could be like out of the 40s.
Yeah, yeah, except that when you really look at the clothing, you know, this kind
Right.
of sash scarf thing around his neck, and especially when you're looking at them next to each other, I guess, you know, there is a similarity, but I was struck by that too. And I didn't read anything that reflected on the differences in the dressing. Certainly the one on the left is at least, well, it's hard to know because we don't necessarily have a good light on it.
Right.
But the one on the left, you don't really see the details of the clothes very much.
Except for
The earliest one, but
Oh.
I can hardly see the knife. But it may be the photo too that is not that great. Yeah.
Right.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that these were unheated houses in places and they wore a lot of clothes compared to us, you know. But
Sure.
I
Right.
wanted to point out because you made Florence, you made that enlargement of Saint Bartholomew and Michelangelo's painting that very cleverly, if you look at it, he is bald next to Jesus, but the hair is on the skin. So he has literally scalp. Did you see that? Oh my God.
Where did I put it's back here quite a ways? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he doesn't look like oh, back here.
Here we
There
go.
it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the curly hair.
The curly hair is on the skin, but he doesn't have any.
I know. Well, he does. He's balding in the front, but if the
Little
back
bit
of
in the
his
back.
head
Yeah,
is
I don't
kind of dark.
Yeah.
I don't know why if that matters. It could
I
be
just think it's funny. It's funny.
could
That's
be
all.
Michelangelo wants to put in some contrast with the leg here behind
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Definitely. I also know that in that particular painting, after, you know, the Renaissance, everybody didn't care about nudity too much, but the next era or so, they ended up putting clothes on people and covering up the genitalia. You
Well,
know?
that's right. And probably this green thing right here is something that they added.
Yeah.
That's my guess, but I don't know for sure. Yes. Anybody else? Come on, jump in.
We do have a comment or a question from Facebook. How did the Timken acquire its St. Bartholomew?
Ah, great.
Oh, yeah, that's a very long story, which I did not put in here. That information is all online. So look at the Timken website. It's very detailed information. Look at the Timken website at the painting, and you will see listed the provenance.
And feel free to type your comments or questions in the chat, and I can read them out for you as well. AP did say, interesting presentation. Thank you, Dr. Gillman. And I would like to say thank you as well for such an interesting and
there's a message here from Giselle to everyone. She says she saw the St. Bartholomew sculpture at Chatsworth House. I have not seen that one. If you're still on, Giselle, would you like to comment?
Oh, yes, I'm still on. Yes, it's in the private chapel of the current Duke and Duchess of Devonshire in the Peak District, north of London, about 2 hours north of London. It's an incredible stately home, and this particular sculpture is amazing. If you can probably Google it and see it in a Google search.
Oh, good. Thanks for telling us about that.
It's
And
quite
also,
impressive.
there is a comment from Ryan. He says, do we know if Rembrandt would have visited the Sistine Chapel? I don't know that offhand. I'm sure Rembrandt scholars might know that. I doubt it because of his identity as a person from a a place where the Counter-Reformation, or where the Reformation, the Reformed churches were dominant, but I don't really know. Does anyone else happen to know? Oh, okay, Giselle's saying she read that he never left Leiden, so that could be. Any other questions? Comments? Well, thank you all for tuning in today. It was a pleasure,
Thank
as
you.
always. Yes.
Yes, so I would like to
It was
say
really
a
good.
big thank you to Dr. Gillman for this wonderful lecture. And if you would like to know more about any upcoming events at the Timken, you can check out the events tab on the Timken website. You check out more virtual talks or other events. And we hope you can join us again next Thursday for another virtual talk.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Have a wonderful Thursday, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.